Today's presentation will be on ActionFlow's non-serialized inventory. In 2 weeks, Roderick from Fabricator's Choice will be presenting on serialized inventory and the rest of the ActionFlow inventory module. But today I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Richard Melville. He's one of the account managers at ActionFlow, Milwaukee resident, and yeah, go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, thanks, Josiah. Milwaukee resident, Milwaukee enthusiast too. Nice to meet you guys. I am Richard. I am an account manager with ActionFlow. I have this fake British accent. It's not fake, it's kind of fake. I lived in England through most of my childhood, so I've lived in America for a while now too, but I always have to preface that in case I say my R's weird or my C's weird, or you can't quite tell where I'm from. I live in Milwaukee. I'm from England originally. And yeah, as Josiah said, today we're going to be talking about non-serialized inventory. You guys all clearly feel like there is a need here. And I thought that the email that was sent out yesterday did a really good job of highlighting the need for tracking non-serialized inventory. Perhaps you have a room in your shop where the odds and ends are constantly piling up, and you need to know how many odds and how many ends. And so how do you keep track? And so ActionFlow has a solution for how you keep track. And yeah, it seems like we're all non-serialized inventory fans today, at least for the next few minutes. So it's going to be pretty relaxed. I'm just going to kind of run through kind of the non-serialized inventory home base, and then we'll also talk about tracking non-serialized inventory and setting up non-serialized inventory. ActionFlow, ActionFlow folks, employees, if I miss something or you need to jump in, just feel free to unmute. For everyone else, there will be time for questions at the end. All right, can everyone see my screen? Josiah, can you see my screen? Just gonna make sure, thanks. So we are on the inventory page here, and the way to get to your non-serialized inventory is in this taskbar, and then you go to non-serialized quantities. I'm gonna have to pull over here. And so this is kind of the home base for non-serialized inventory within ActionFlow. And like, all things in ActionFlow, it's broken down into SKU classes, SKU items, and then actions. So let me run through these. So this is just our test account. So some of these numbers might be wonky, just know that. But we have our SKU classes up here: brackets, cork, tile, sink, and then we have some adhesives. So if I click sink, you can see all the SKU items that we have. So I've been working with the LK123, so that's what I'm going to use in my demonstration today. We have a non-serialized quantity here. So this is how many of those sinks we have at 47. We have an alert quantity of 10. So that means that if we get below 10, or, it's going to give us an alert. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in just a few minutes. And then on the right here, we have our different actions. And so this tells me when non-serialized sinks were added and when they were taken away. So you see the action here was use, -1. So that means we used one sink yesterday at 1:05 p.m. and that was Richard, me. It was tagged to this area 6233. And after that sink was used, there was 42 minus 1 is 41. I bet you didn't think you were going to get a math lesson today, but we're gonna keep up with the math here. So that's using, and we'll talk about that in just a second. You can also add non-serialized inventory, right? So here we've added 5 because in my fake countertop shop, I realized I took one away. I needed to add some back. 2 minutes afterwards, this is my inventory order. 2327. So if I went to that inventory order, I could see those 5 LK123s. And then 41 plus 5 is going to be 46. You can see on the right here, we have our cumulative cost. So this is how much money we have in those non-serialized LK123 sinks. The final kind of action that's on this list is update. And so you can see here, update doesn't quite have the same information that the others have, right? The quantity says 47 here as opposed to 1. So update, what that means is if I go in here and I put 48, what that's going to do is it's going to update that to 48. So you see that I just added 1 and our cumulative quantity is 48. Now, I'm going to recommend that you use the ordering and the actual usage of the inventory as opposed to updating there, but it can be helpful at the very beginning as you're kind of setting this all up. So this is our home base. We're going to come back to this, but now let's go ahead and look how we actually use that non-serialized inventory. So I've already set up a customer here. It's Mr. Non-Serialized Inventory. He's a super easy customer. He's, a nice guy, and I'll pull up his quote. This is all he wants. It's really simple. And so I've got a cutout, and as you might presume, it is going to be an LK123. I've also added some transparent silicone on here in my line items. And so this is what I need for this particular job. And we can see the non-serialized quantities here. I can edit these. So if I actually need 5 transparent silicones, I can put that there as well. And so what I'll do now is I'm happy with my inventory items. So I'm going to calc and save, and I'm going to close this. Now I'm going to go to the fabrication tab, which is one of my kind of favorite tabs in ActionFlow. This is how you actually use that inventory. And so you can see here that it's copied that information from the inventory items on the quote. We've got the transparent silicone, 5 of those, and we've got our sink as well. If we wanted to add a new item, so say I actually needed brackets, I can click that green plus sign up here, and I can go ahead and put brackets and then put a bracket in like that. Now, here's something to note. The system is designed so that if you don't use this immediately, it is going to go away. That's intentional, so just know that. So I'll add those brackets again and show you that if we use them, we're good to go. So if I click use there, oh, just kidding, I do need to add a quantity. So if I click use there, I'm going to use my cork, and then I'm going to also use my LK123. And now if we go back to my non-serialized quantities, back to our home base, what you'll see is this LK123 was just used. One of those was used at this exact time in this exact area, and now we have 47 left. If I was to go into my cork, I could see that I just used 5 of these. Looks like I, at some point, added 100. And then the brackets as well, we can go in and we can see that that was used as well. So that's how we use them. That's how we kind of take away our non-serialized inventory. How do we actually add them? And I'm going to kind of go through this quickly because Roderick is going to be talking about this, as Josiah said, in his kind of inventory webinar. But to actually add non-serialized inventory, what we're going to do is we're going to click this green plus sign to create a new order. We're going to add an inventory item. So I just used a sink, so I'm going to add a new one. And my favorite sink is this LK123. If I need to change the quantity, I can add 3 of those, and it's going to update the cost automatically. And then I'm going to save it. I'm also going to add a vendor in here. So I'll add BBI, so I know where I'm ordering it from. And then I need to work through the actions. So these actions are what's going to tell the system whether the sink has been ordered, whether it's been received, and whether we're ready to go. So I've got this order action. When I hit done here, it's going to pop up an error and it's going to say, hold on, you need to give me a delivery date. So if I put a delivery date in here, and if I say I'm expecting these next Wednesday and click done, it's going to let me go through. And it's also going to say that the status has changed on the order. So if you notice up here, it was created and now it's in ordered status. And down here as well, it's also in ordered status. Got to keep going through my actions here. I've got a received, and when I click full, it's going to pull up this location box. And what I'll do is I'll put my location. It's going to be an A1. And I click OK, and that status has changed again to received. And this box is telling us that that status has changed to received. There's one more item in here, but that's for Kim, and I'm not gonna do her job because she likes doing her job. So we've just received that sync. So if I go back to my home base, this non-serialized quantities, and I go ahead and pull this up, and I look at my LK123, like magic, there is now 3 more syncs and we have 50 syncs. So we are in the clear. I've just added some more. So that's how you kind of track non-serialized quantities, how you order non-serialized quantities, and how you use non-serialized quantities. And I'm just going to take a moment here to say I'm using syncs as an example. Syncs obviously can be non-serialized, or they can also be serialized. In this case, they're non-serialized. You could even have 2 different SKU classes. You could have a non-serialized sync SKU class, and then just a regular sync SKU class as well. But let's actually talk about reporting with this non-serialized quantity. So if I close this, I'm going to show you just a few reports today. So if I go into my inventory report, the first one I'm going to show you is this inventory snapshot non-serialized. And so if I pull this up, it's just going to create this really clean report of what non-serialized items do you have, right? So if I look at my LK123 syncs, you can see that I have 47 for a unit cost and then a value. And you're probably saying, hang on, you just added 3 syncs, you should have 50. So what this is doing is it's actually tracking as of 3:20 at midnight. So it's saying, as the day begun today, how many syncs did you have? So if you want to know how many syncs you have once, now I've clicked order, what you're going to do is you're going to click 3:21. We'll just go into the future and we'll say basically midnight tonight. And you'll notice here that we have 50 LK123s. So this is a really just nice report. And you can also break it down into different classes too. So we only have a few classes and a few non-serialized inventory. But if you have a bunch, then it would be, probably easier to actually just go ahead and look in your classes as they are broken down. All right. Let's go into the inventory alerts here. So if I go back to my inventory snapshot, and if I go to inventory alerts, non-serialized, and I pull this up, we have a whole bunch of filters here, right? And it says, there's no data in this report. So if I add a class, and if I add syncs, or if I just make that null, but I'll just do syncs now, and I click preview, what I'll find is that the inventory alerts that I have set up on that non-serialized homepage that I was showing you just a few minutes ago. And let me just kind of talk you through this, because the first time I saw this, it looks like a different language. So here's my LK123, and I have a current quantity of 50, right? We've been tracking that. We know that we have 50. In this ordered, we have 3 that are currently being ordered. We have 3 that are currently being ordered. And those will come in on March 25th. So I could go and I did this before our webinar today, and I ordered 3 that are on our way. So then it adds the current ordered and the amount that you have to be 53. And then it has the required quantity. So this is 51. So this says that currently there are 51 LK123 syncs being tagged to separate jobs. So, maybe one job has 10 syncs, but there are 51 that we need. Okay. We have 2 available beyond that 51 because it's doing the 53 minus the 51 because we will have 53 in our shop. And we have an alert quantity of 10. So that means that if we get below 10, we need to be alerted. So right now we have less that we need to order 8 syncs. So this is going to be a really helpful tool in terms of figuring out what you need to order, right? If I always want 10 more syncs than I have tagged to jobs, then I need to order 8 syncs here. As I say, get familiar with this report. It's going to be really helpful in determining what you need to order. There are a whole bunch of inventory reports. I'd suggest that you play around with them, you look into them, you find what works for you, work from there. I just have one more thing to show you, and that's actually how to set up that those non-serialized quantities. So in administration, in SKU items, the way that you mark something as non-serialized is in this SKU classes section here. You can see that my brackets are marked as non-serialized. My cork is non-serialized. Once you tick that box, that's how something will show up on that non-serialized section. All right, and then the final thing before we go to questions here is I do just want to plug the knowledge base. So this page right here, if you watch this and you say you're there right now and you say I want to kind of learn more, I just want to plug the knowledge base on actionflow.net. This page here, Grace created it. It has a whole bunch of information about non-serialized inventory, setting it up, using reports. It's comprehensive, and it's going to be your best friend if you want it to be. And then also feel free to speak to an account manager as well. All of you have an account manager that you know, so feel free to reach out to us as well. That is kind of all I have for the non-serialized inventory. I see, Roderick, that you're unmuted. I'm not sure if you have something to say.
Sorry. Yes, I
no
did.
worries.
I was deeply involved in the implementation and the design of this feature. And so I do have some comments I'd like to make, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, please.
Can you go back to the inventory quantities section where you define the alerts, please? I wanted to point out that it's my suggestion, if you go to sinks, for instance, my suggestion that you set an alert quantity of 0 on every item that is there, with the exception of the ones that you want to have a valid number. If there's no value in that field, it will never show up on the report. So it's a good idea to enter 0 on all the ones that you do not want to define with a number like 10 or 5 or 3 or 2. This way, they will show up on that inventory alerts report, even though it's not going to tell you if you're underwater or above water, but at least that's how they show on the reports. And I'll be bringing this up in my session in a couple of weeks as well. So I think that's a very powerful thing to know if you're going to do that.
Yeah, that's a really good suggestion.
The other thing that we learned, and unfortunately was learning it the hard way, those of you that have a relationship with QuickBooks using the synchronization feature, you're currently used to the inventory items coming over into QuickBooks as an inventory component or as a cost of goods component or whatever the case may be. There you go. So now you can see all your items and you can quickly see what's going on with those. So you'd have to define the alert quantity of 0 to see that.
Right.
So back to QuickBooks, be aware that there will be no financial transactional information relevant to inventory going back and forth between QuickBooks and ActionFlow outside of the revenue or the income. So if we go back to that report where you showed the snapshot, if you could, please. I want to just talk a little bit about where these numbers come from. So since non-serialized inventory doesn't know anything about each individual sink, it wouldn't know if you paid $50 for one or $10 for another or $200 for another. All we can do as far as defining the unit cost and the extended value is looking at the SKU default cost. So in your item configuration in the SKUs, whatever that default cost is what's going to be used here. So just be aware that if you had to bring a sink in that was very expensive for whatever reason, $20 more than you'd normally pay, this cost that Richard is showing you, that is the only value it can pull because it has no other relevance on non-serialized inventory. So be aware of that. And again, the QuickBooks thing is probably very important. The other thing, Richard, that you missed, which was a big deal when we first developed this, we developed this for folks at Artistic Marble and Granite in the Kansas, Wichita, Kansas area. They were really up on this because Moreware uses the inventory automatically. And so we wanted to have the same functionality in here. And I noticed you manually click the Use button in the Fabrication tab. However, that's not necessary. If your job status, when your job status changes to installed, it will auto release the inventory from your count sessions. So if you have 50 sinks and you have 2 of those models on today's install, as soon as the installer changes the status of the job to installed, it'll auto relieve that inventory. This negates the need to have to manually click it inside the Fabrication tab, which is exactly what we wanted to avoid. having to do this as you would with serialized inventory. And one final comment, again, learning the hard way. If you decide to go with non-serialized inventory and you switch one of your classes over to it, be aware if you change your mind 3 months from now, you'll have to, and go back to serialized, you'll have to re-enter all your quantities and it's not going to magically convert them to serialized inventory. So just be aware of that. And the other comment, just the last comment here, Richard, I'm sorry I'm taking so long here.
No, you got it.
In grid view, many of you are used to using grid view to determine the value of your inventory, and you can no longer do that. The only place you can evaluate non-serialized inventory is in the various areas that Richard has already shown you. Do not use grid view. It will not give you any accurate information whatsoever on non-serialized inventory.
Awesome. Thanks, Roderick. That is, yeah, that's all invaluable information and appreciate it.
Just a quick question from Mike. You may have already covered this. He asked, the cost of non-serialized inventory will pull through to the job cost reports. Can you confirm?
I believe they do, Richard. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, because that you're in within ActionFlow, and again, it's going to use the default cost, Mike, that is on the SKU. So it wouldn't know if you paid $200 for that sink or you paid $150. It's going to use what's in the SKU configuration as far as the cost value goes.
Yep.
Right.
Any other questions?
I do have another question. You said that the item will disappear from the fabrication tab if it's not used, but then Roderick said it will auto-complete if it's once the job is moved to installed. When you said it'll disappear, what's going on there?
Yeah, so I'm just saying if you add an item in the fabrication tab,
Right,
and you don't use it, then it will disappear.
See,
So
he
it has
added
to
it, Mike. It wasn't on the original area,
Yep.
so he manually added it at the time he wanted to place his order. So that makes sense.
Okay.
Because that item doesn't exist in the area.
If he adds it, if it's in the area though, it'll automatically show up on the fabrication tab.
Correct.
And it'll stay there
It
until it's used.
auto relieves itself when the job status changes to installed.
Yes. Perfect. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bridget, go ahead.
Okay, so I wanted to add to a little bit of this in the using the item versus having an install, or like if this was just a customer coming in to buy something like a cash and carry where they just wanted brackets or needed some kind of extra and it's not related to an install, obviously that would be something where you would want to manually click the status of used. But also when there's a callback instead of a completed install and we didn't click use and we don't go back within an X amount of days, ActionFlow will untag that. So my suggestion would be to click use if you know it actually left.
It won't untag it, Bridget. It won't untag it at all. It's going to leave it alone until it gets set to installed. So your reference is to serialized inventory. That's a different conversation.
So it won't do that. It won't do that with non-serialized then.
Correct.
Okay.
So what Richard showed was a manual method. So in this case, it was manual because the brackets were not part of the area on that job. He added it on the fly. However, the other items, the caulk and the sink, would have auto-relieved itself from non-serialized inventory quantities when the job status changes to installed. These are very different settings and rulings that you would see on a serialized inventory. That's a different conversation. I'll put that into context when I do my session in a couple of weeks.
I guess I have one more question. If you don't want, say you've got consumables like caulk and rags that you want on there, but you don't want it to be showing up on the quote. can you put that on in the area, but have that item hidden on the area?
Yeah.
But it still shows up in the fabrication tab.
Richard, just
Right.
open up the line item summary on this one, please.
On
No,
the
no,
fabrication tab.
right where you were. Yeah, line item summary to the right of the inventory there. Okay, so what I wanted to just make sure that Mike saw clearly was it never lists the bracket here at all.
Right, we've added that, but the say the silicone, is the quote showing a tube of silicone on it?
In
Or is
this
that-
case, yes, more than likely.
Yeah.
Is,
I mean,
is there, you could
yeah,
hide
we can
that
hide
those?
that.
Okay,
Mhm.
if you wanted to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The SKUs would have to be configured to not appear on the customer facing documentation, correct?
Okay, got it.
Okay, we've got a couple questions from the chat. First, if you purchase the same items from two separate vendors at different costs, how do you set it up?
There's no way that I know of. Because non-serialized inventory doesn't know anything about individual costs. You'd have to, if that's the case, you would have no choice but to not have that be non-serialized inventory. But it can only be done at a class level. You can't do it on an item by item or SKU by SKU basis.
Okay. And then second question, by auto relieving itself as installed or at the install, the quote line item, it will show a status of installed, correct?
As far as I know.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, because the area gets to a status of installed and the associate line items follow suit.
Great. Any other questions? Going once. All right. Well, thank you, Roderick and Richard, for presenting, and thank you everyone for engaging. Like I said, we will send out this recording in a couple of days, and join us in 2 weeks as we cover the rest of the inventory module. And have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Thank you. Thanks, Richard.